In the quiet, sleepy town of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a terrible secret lurked behind the walls of an ordinary family home. The kind of secret that, once uncovered, would tear lives apart and lead to an unspeakable tragedy. This is the story of a forbidden affair that spiraled out of control, culminating in a murder no one could have seen coming. But let's start at the beginning. The police were called to a modest house on Lansdowne Avenue, responding to a 911 call made by a young man who could barely get the words out. When they arrived, the officers found a horrifying scene. Ava Cartwright, a woman in her late 30s, lay on the floor, her body surrounded by a pool of blood. The paramedics pronounced her dead on the scene. The young man who had called for help stood frozen, his face pale and streaked with tears. That young man was Jordan Cartwright, Ava's nephew. But this was no ordinary family tragedy. The moment the detectives arrived, they knew something was off. Jordan wasn't just a grieving relative, there was something deeper in his eyes, a guilt that couldn't be hidden. As they questioned him, a twisted tale of betrayal and forbidden love began to unfold. But to understand what led to Ava's brutal murder, we must go back to where it all started. Jordan Cartwright, at 21 years old, was home from college for the summer. He had always been close to his father, Nathan, a successful businessman known throughout the town, but there was someone else who had always loomed large in Jordan's life, his father's younger sister, Ava. Ava was a free spirit, unlike anyone Jordan had ever known. She wasn't tied down by responsibilities or the expectations of society. She had never married, never had children, and lived a life full of excitement and danger that intrigued Jordan from a young age. But it was more than just admiration. As Jordan grew older, the feelings he had for his aunt began to change. It was during that fateful summer when their relationship crossed a line that should never have been crossed. Ava had always been flirtatious, a woman who enjoyed attention and knew how to get it. And Jordan, still young and impressionable, was drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. At first, it was nothing more than harmless teasing, but slowly it became something darker, more forbidden. One hot summer night, after a family barbecue at Ava's house, everything changed. The evening had been filled with laughter, wine, and old family stories, but as the guests left, Jordan lingered behind. Ava, wearing a playful smirk, offered him another glass of wine. They sat together, just the two of them, the air thick with an unspoken tension. "You're not a little boy anymore, are you?" Ava said with a smile, her voice laced with something seductive, something dangerous. Jordan's heart raced. The words lingered in the air between them, and he could feel the invisible line that was about to be crossed. He didn't know what to say, how to respond, but in that moment, it didn't matter. Ava closed the space between them, and before he could think, she kissed him. What should have been a moment of horror and realization for Jordan became something else entirely. He kissed her back, and from that night on, their relationship transformed into a secret affair that would seal both their fates. They met in secret, always careful to avoid suspicion. For Jordan, the excitement of their forbidden relationship was intoxicating. He had never felt anything like it before, and Ava, with her wild charm, drew him deeper into her web. They spent hours together, hidden away from the world, at her house when no one was around, sometimes even sneaking away to secluded spots in the woods or late at night in her car. Ava loved the danger. It thrilled her to have a hold over Jordan, to push the boundaries of what was acceptable. She treated their affair like a game, something thrilling, something exhilarating. But for Jordan, it became more than that. He wasn't just in love, he was obsessed. The guilt gnawed at him day and night. This was his aunt, a woman who had been there for him all his life, and yet he couldn't stop. The thrill of being with her, the passion they shared, consumed him. He began pulling away from his father, avoiding family gatherings, staying out late. Nathan, always the attentive father, noticed the change in his son. At first, he chalked it up to the usual growing pains of a young man, but soon he realized something darker was going on. Suspense began to build, both for the family and for Jordan. He could sense his father's suspicions growing. Nathan had started asking more questions, trying to figure out why Jordan was acting so distant. But the real danger came when Nathan discovered text messages between his son and his sister. Nothing too explicit, but enough to raise alarm bells in his mind. That's when everything began to unravel. One evening, Nathan decided to confront his sister. He went to Ava's house, his heart heavy with suspicion. When he arrived, the door was slightly ajar, and what he saw inside would forever haunt him. Jordan and Ava were together. Too close, too intimate. Nathan didn't say a word, but his face said everything. Ava, ever the manipulator, tried to laugh it off. "Nathan, it's not what you think," she said, her voice full of false bravado. But Nathan knew. He knew his son had crossed a line, and he knew his sister had led him there. The confrontation that followed was explosive. Nathan's fury was uncontrollable, his voice shaking as he yelled at both of them. Jordan stood frozen, the weight of his guilt crashing down on him like a wave. The rage between father and son boiled over into a physical fight. Nathan couldn't contain his anger, and Jordan, though filled with shame, fought back. It was a nightmare none of them could have ever imagined. But Ava, ever the puppet master, stayed calm. She knew the power she held over both men and reveled in it. She believed she could control them both, bending them to her will, but that belief would be her downfall. A week later, Ava was dead. The circumstances of her death were unclear, but the brutality was undeniable. The police were called to investigate what looked like a crime of passion, but they quickly realized this was more than just a lover's quarrel. Jordan was questioned. Nathan, too, was brought in for interrogation. The investigators began piecing together the timeline of the events leading up to her murder. But there was still one burning question left unanswered. Who killed Ava Cartwright? Was it Jordan, overcome by guilt and shame for what he had done? Or was it Nathan, seeking revenge for the betrayal of his son and sister? The truth lies ahead, in a conclusion that will leave you breathless and shocked. The twisted game they were playing had only one outcome, and it was death. When the investigators began piecing together the events surrounding Ava Cartwright's murder, one thing became immediately clear. This wasn't a simple crime. There was something far more twisted lurking beneath the surface, and as they dug deeper into the Cartwright family's tangled history, the lines between love, guilt, and betrayal became increasingly blurred. The autopsy report revealed that Ava had been stabbed multiple times, a brutal and frenzied attack. This wasn't the work of a calculated killer. It was personal, emotional. Whoever had done this hadn't planned it out. It was a crime of passion. The police turned their attention to the two men who had been closest to Ava, her nephew, Jordan, and her brother, Nathan. Jordan, still reeling from the discovery of Ava's body, was questioned first. The police already knew about his affair with Ava, an affair that had rocked the Cartwright family to its core. Jordan was visibly shaken as he spoke to the detectives, his hands trembling, his voice unsteady. But there was something in his demeanor that didn't sit right with them. Was it just the shock of losing someone he had been so intimately involved with, or was there something more? Jordan's story was simple. He had been in love with Ava, a love that was wrong on every level. He admitted to everything, the secret meetings, the passionate affair, the guilt that had consumed him. He claimed that on the night Ava was killed, he had been at home, trying to distance himself from her after his father discovered their relationship, but his alibi wasn't airtight, and the police weren't convinced. When the detectives spoke to Nathan, the story took an even darker turn. Nathan had always been a man of control, calm, collected, a pillar of the community. But when his son's affair with his sister came to light, that control snapped. Nathan admitted to confronting Ava and Jordan, to the explosive argument that had torn their family apart. But he swore he had nothing to do with Ava's murder. He claimed he had cut his sister out of his life after the confrontation, too disgusted to even look at her. But the question remained, how far would a father go to protect his son, or to seek revenge for a betrayal so deep it destroyed his family? As the investigation continued, the detectives began to notice inconsistencies in Jordan's and Nathan's stories. There were gaps in their timelines, small details that didn't add up. And then there was the matter of Ava's behavior in the days leading up to her death. Friends and neighbors described Ava as being increasingly paranoid. She had been making strange calls to people at odd hours, speaking in cryptic terms about danger and secrets that could destroy everything. Some thought she was being dramatic, but others sensed real fear in her voice. It was clear that Ava was hiding something, and that something had finally caught up with her. The police dug deeper, combing through Ava's phone records and emails, looking for any clue that could point them toward her killer. And that's when they found it. An email sent from Ava to Jordan just days before her death. The message was short, cryptic, and chilling. "We can't keep doing this. It's gone too far. I think Nathan knows more than he's letting on. Be careful. We're both in danger." The emails sent shockwaves through the investigation. What did Ava mean by danger? Did she fear for her life, or was she worried that the truth of their affair would come out? And what exactly did Nathan know? The detectives brought Jordan back in for questioning, showing him the email. His reaction was immediate, his face drained of color, and he became visibly agitated. He insisted that Ava had been paranoid, that she often exaggerated things when she felt trapped. But there was something in his eyes that suggested more than just fear. Was it guilt? Or was he hiding something darker? And then, a breakthrough. Forensic evidence from the crime scene revealed fingerprints on the murder weapon, the kitchen knife that had ended Ava's life. The prints were a match for Jordan's. When confronted with the evidence, Jordan broke down, tears streaming down his face. He admitted to being at Ava's house the night she was killed, but what he told the detectives next would shock everyone. According to Jordan, the night of the murder, he had gone to Ava's house to end their affair once and for all. He couldn't live with the guilt anymore, couldn't continue deceiving his father. He claimed Ava had become increasingly unstable in the weeks leading up to her death, paranoid that Nathan would find a way to destroy them both. Jordan said that when he tried to leave, Ava became hysterical, begging him not to abandon her. The argument escalated, and in a moment of blind rage, Ava grabbed the knife. Jordan insisted that it was self-defense, that Ava had lunged at him, and in the struggle, she had been accidentally stabbed. But the wounds didn't match his story. The autopsy showed that Ava had been stabbed multiple times in a deliberate and violent attack. The detectives didn't believe his version of events. It was clear that Jordan wasn't telling the whole truth. The theory they began to piece together was darker. Perhaps Jordan, consumed by guilt and shame, had gone to Ava's house not to end the affair, but to end her life, knowing that the secret they shared could never see the light of day. But there was one more twist in the tale. As the investigation reached its climax, new evidence came to light. Evidence that pointed in a completely different direction. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera showed a figure leaving Ava's house around the time of the murder. The figure wasn't Jordan, it was Nathan. The police confronted Nathan with the footage, and the truth finally came spilling out. On the night of Ava's death, Nathan had gone to her house, not to confront her about the affair, but to end it. He had been consumed by rage, not only at his sister, but at the way she had manipulated his son. He saw her as a threat to everything he had worked for, everything he valued. In a fit of uncontrollable anger, he had attacked Ava, stabbing her in a blind fury. Jordan had arrived shortly after, finding Ava's body and panicking. He had touched the knife in shock, leaving his fingerprints behind, but he hadn't been the one to kill her. It was Nathan all along, a father driven to murder by the ultimate betrayal of his son and his sister. In the end, Nathan was arrested and charged with Ava's murder, while Jordan was left to pick up the pieces of a life shattered by guilt, shame, and loss. This was a crime born out of forbidden love and deadly secrets, a tragedy that could have been avoided, but instead ended in bloodshed. True crime case resolution.